Good morning to everyone who is joining the session now. We're just waiting 1 more minute or two before everyone joins, and then we'll start. Welcome, everyone. Great, I think that we can start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this side event called Food Security, Climate Change and Health, Women Leading the Response. My name is David Imbao Jacome. I am CORE Group's Technical Programs Officer, and I am one of the organizers of this side event. This side event is co-hosted between CORE Group and Pathfinder. We're considering this side event as a UNGA and UN Food System Summit side event, and we're very happy to have you here today. Just to give you a bit overview of why we are attending this side event, as part of CORE Group's climate change program, Building an Equitable Future, Climate Action and Inclusivity and Health, Food Security and Gender are pillars of the initiative. And Pathfinder is no stranger to the topic as well. Pathfinder's women and climate programs have not only cleared the environment and made natural resources more sustainable, but have also fostered gender equality and resilience, preparing communities to withstand shock stressors from climate change through the leadership of women and girls. During the side event, we will be discussing why food security is a gender issue and the links between climate change and health, including food security as well, and initiatives to tackle these challenges. I would like to remind the participants of the side event that there is the possibility to listen to the presentations in different languages. You can see on the menu bar on the bottom of your screen the different interpretations that we have available today, which are English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. We encourage you to use this feature since we are looking to make this event as inclusive as possible. I would also just like to mention that we encourage you also to use the chat function to ask questions to the speakers. We'll have a specific time in the agenda for a moderated panel discussion, and we look forward to seeing your questions in this to the speakers during this time. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand it over the moderation of the session to Dr. Kathleen Marr. Dr. Kathleen Marr is a senior associate at Women's Leaders for Planetary Health, a social enterprise dedicated to bridging the gap between environmental and health policies via gender-just solutions, with a special emphasis on empowering women in the Global South. She holds a PhD in atmospheric chemistry and is also a research group leader at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, Germany, where her work focuses on the synergies and interactions between climate, air quality, and planetary health. Dr. Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction, and thanks to the CORE Group and Pathfinder International for the invitation to moderate this very exciting panel that we have coming up for us today. And I believe I have a few slides. Yeah, great. So David also introduced briefly Women Leaders for Planetary Health, my organization. And we're really about, as he said, bridging the gap between environmental and health policy, focusing on gender-just solutions. We offer a digital leadership academy and mentoring programs. And we also have a special focus on young women from the Global South for whom we offer scholarships. I would like to just take one moment and speak about the concept of planetary health. So many of you have probably heard it, but the idea behind planetary health is that the health of our planet and the health of the humans that live on us, so human health, are really interdependent, and you can't separate one from the other. So planetary health is a concept that's really about looking at these big global problems in a manner that's about making connections that's about maybe intersectionality and focusing on interconnecting communities. And that's one of the reasons why I think today's panel is so exciting. Could you move to the next slide, please? So the title of today's panel is Food Security, Climate Change and Health, Women Leading the Response. I don't know if in your communities, this concept of silos is talked about, but here within the title, we have 4 big topics. We have food security, climate change, health, and women and gender. And we know that in the academic sphere, in other NGO spheres, there are people and groups working very specifically on just one of these topics, people who are really focusing on climate change, people who are public health experts, etc. And what we're doing here is really trying to look at this in an integrated manner. And instead of looking at these issues separately, we want to think about this all together. What are the connections here? And so if you'll move to my next slide, that's just what I'm trying to paint a picture of here. We don't want to look at these issues separately. They're really intertwined. And I'm really excited to hear our panelists today and what they have to say about this, because these are really exciting and important topics. I think there have been some polls in the chat. Okay. We'd love to hear more about who's listening in today, who you are in the audience. So if you could fill in these polls, that would be great. And we'll show the results shortly. So just about where you're from and what your constituency is. I'm going to do that myself. David, could you let me know when we're ready to show the results of the polls? So while people are filling in this poll, I would like to introduce all of our speakers at once. I have some bios, and then we'll join together and hear some panel discussions. Okay. Here we go. I think everybody should be seeing the results of the polls like I am. So we have a lot of participants from the Americas. Might make sense because of the time zone, but we are well represented across the globe, a lot of NGOs and a lot of other constituencies as well. So another warm welcome for me, and I look forward to jumping into the discussion. With that, I would like to then introduce our first speaker. Okay, great. I see all the pictures of the panelists here. So I'm going to do introductions for each one, and then I'll hand it over to them step by step to hear their presentations. So our first speaker will be Mr. Mohammed Aslam Gauri. He's the outgoing Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Coastal Development with the government of Sindh, Pakistan. He has an MSc in Social Policy and Planning from the London School of Economics and has 10 years of experience working in public government, including previously serving as the director with the Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Livestock, Karachi. He will be our first speaker today. After we hear from Mr. Mohammed about his experiences in Pakistan with the government, we will hear from Pamela Hondusso. She is a master's in public health, and she is the advocacy manager for East and Southern Africa with Pathfinder International. Ms. Hondusso has over 2 decades of progressive sub-Saharan Africa experience working with the private, public, and FBO sectors on population and sustainable development, adolescent and youth sexual reproductive health and family planning program design, management, new business development, advocacy, and policy. Her career encompasses USAID-funded global youth programs, including expanded service delivery, expanded to action, focus on young adults. She supported the Africa Youth Alliance, which was the first youth program funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and that was in Uganda, Tanzania, Botswana, and Ghana. In Kenya, she supported USAID's Afya Pwani program, the regional 7-country female condom education and advocacy project, and the Health of People and Environment in Lake Victoria Basin, a women-led climate resilience initiative implemented in Kenya and Uganda to achieve sustainable development. She's also a mentor and SRHR professional, and employs diverse media platforms, including film, radio, and documentaries for advocacy and policy. So quite a lot of experience there. I'd also like to take the opportunity to introduce Toyosi Bakare, who's the founder of Action GX. We'll also be hearing from her today. Oluwatoyosi is an environmental scientist with hands-on practical experience in environmental administration, curriculum development, and management. She is the founder of Action GX, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to encourage children and adults to love and take better care of their community and the earth through environmental education and participation. She's a policy and product strategist at Chava Environmental Consults, which aims to give bespoke environmental solutions to startups and established businesses. She has a podcast known as The Climb, which she uses to educate on environmental issues. And last but certainly not least, we're going to hear closing words from Lisa Hilmi. She's the executive director of the CORE Group. Lisa has over 30 years of global health experience in over 20 countries, employing both human rights and community-based participatory approaches to addressing health disparities for women, children, and communities. As a nurse, researcher, and public health expert, Lisa has worked at multiple levels of global health in policy research, emergency relief and response, development, workforce development, health system strengthening from local to global levels. She's worked in development settings, led response to HIV, AIDS, STIs, GBV in refugee and conflict settings, and developed policy for outbreaks, disasters, and epidemics in multiple countries. She holds an MPH from Columbia University and a BSN, was a Jonas Nurse Scholar, is a certified pediatric nurse, and holds a BA in Communications and Political Science from Villanova University. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here. And I think we can all agree with the speakers we have today, we have a really deep and diverse range of experience on this topic, food security, climate change, and health, and specifically women leading the response. And so with that, I would like to turn this over to Mr. Mohammed Aslam Ghari for our remarks. As a reminder, he is the outgoing Secretary of Environmental Protection, Climate Change, and Coastal Development in Pakistan. Mr. Mohammed Aslam Ghari, please. I guess I forgot a video. Should we do that first? Apologies.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, we hear you. So why don't you start with your remarks? Thank you.
Okay. Can you share the screen, please? Okay, here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Mohammed Aslam Ghari, former Secretary, Climate Change, Environment, Climate Change, Coastal Development Department, Government of Sindh, Pakistan. And thank you for introducing me and inviting me to this event. It's really an honor for me to be here. I'll be talking about the governmental interventions in food security and gender with specific focus on the province of Sindh. The first slide, please. You know, Pakistan ranks 5th on the Global Climate Risk Index as a country most vulnerable to climate change. This is despite the fact that Pakistan is among the least contributors or the very few, the contribution of Pakistan to the global emissions is the least, but it is at 5th place in the global climate risk index. The effects of climate change in Pakistan and within the province of Sindh are diverse and depend upon unique ecological zones, and that are variably affected by floods, heat waves, rising temperatures, sea intrusions or recession, land and water resource degradation, deforestation, water salination, droughts, and extended wet spells, cyclones, pest infestations, etc., leading to different effects on different communities. With a particular focus on Sindh, it is important to understand that the geographical terrain of Sindh is diverse, and so is the health impact. For instance, the impact in Thar and desert areas, Larkana, Khairpur, and similar districts, and the cities of Karachi and Hyderabad are not the same. Overall, the issues of stunting and wasting are predominant in rural areas of Sindh and are closely tied to climate change as it alters food quality and production, consumption patterns, and modifies land and water use. We will look to understand how climate change is impacting Sindh crop yields and food production in the later slides. But it must be understood now that the climate change impacts cross-cut different ecological zones, and thus the geographical diversity that Sindh boasts of requires a region or area-wise climate change strategy and investment plans. Next slide, please. Okay, this is something about the province of Sindh. It is predominantly agrarian society, and women provide largest proportion of labor force. Changing precipitation patterns in Sindh depict predominant conditions of drought. Some flood years are a result of upstream water flowing downstream through the Indus River. The upstream and downstream river system is connected. Surplus water in the upstream directly affects the low elevation plains of Sindh. Weak monsoon results in high temperature and reduced water availability in Sindh, as upstream areas consume the scarce resource, leaving little for the downstream areas. This has deleterious impacts on crop production, especially in Sindh. In the province, a majority of men and women farmers are either small subsistence farmers, tenants, or sharecroppers. Different ecological zones within the province make up for different levels of dependence on land, water, and or livestock for food, water, livelihood, and access to traditional medicines that are differently impacted by climate change. Women in Sindh are involved in crop production from sowing to harvesting stages, livestock rearing, and other allied fields in agriculture. Women in sharecropping are tenant families often go entirely unpaid for work undertaken on farmlands. In terms of skilled agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, women greatly outstrip the percentage of men by more than double across Pakistan. That is 54% women, 54.6% women to be specific, and versus 25.2% men. Excuse me. Within the agriculture sector, women are concentrated primarily in dairy and livestock, although their contribution to other subsectors is substantial and varies across provinces and regions. Approximately 75% of women and girls ages 10 and above in the formal labor force are employed in the agriculture sector. about 70% of all employed women work informally. Women farmers in rural Sindh are a significant part of the agriculture workforce. In 2015, excuse me, in 2015, an FAO study in Pakistan reported that Pakistan's role in agriculture increased during the last 2 decades as many men migrated from Sindh's rural areas to urban centers to improve their income possibilities and to avoid exploitation from local landlords. Women in Sindh are involved in crop production from sowing to harvesting stages. Rural women in agriculture working on average for 12 to 14 hours a day. Next slide, please. Now, climate impacts on crops. The climate of Sindh is arid and hot. According to classification made by UNESCO, the region has been divided into 3 zones: coastal, northern, and southern. Excuse me. Different areas are suitable for different crops. For example, lower part of the province is best for sugarcane, coconut, banana, and papaya. The plains of Middle Sindh are suitable for dry crops. In the upper Sindh and right bank areas of the Indus River, crop is grown richly. The eastern portion of the province and Kacho area are suitable for rain-fed crops like millets and guar. The increase in temperature will increase the rate of evaporation of moisture from the soil surface and transpiration from the plant tissues in the vegetated areas of the province. They will directly enhance the water requirement of field crops, animals, human beings, as well as the domestic and the industrial sectors. Next slide, please. Now, food insecurity in Sindh. The map depicted here is from the study done in Sindh in 9 rural areas. As you can see, the phase classification of most of these areas is of a crisis, with 2 districts in stress. According to this analysis, around 3.1 million people are estimated to be facing high level of acute food insecurity, with the tapering off to 2.6 million due to the beginning of harvesting season. The study revealed a few key drivers of food insecurity, including high food prices, locust outbreaks, and heavy monsoon rains, flooding, all exacerbated by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. It further revealed that of the households surveyed, merely 2.9 acres of agricultural land were owned, which is small relative to the household size in the analyzed districts and not enough to produce adequate food production for household consumption for longer duration. 22% of households do not cultivate land, 24% cultivate up to 2 acres, 29% cultivate between 2 and 5 acres, and 25% cultivate more than 5 acres. Due to small land holding and subsistence level, crop production on average, the own production of seasoned cereals is merely sufficient for household consumption for 4 months and 1 month respectively, suggesting limited or no carryover stock from previous seasons for the majority of households, particularly for the households who cultivate 5 acres of land or less and have a large family size. COVID-19 related measures such as lockdown, restrictions on movement, limited business hours affected crop production due to limited availability of seeds, fertilizers, labor, and agricultural machinery for harvesting, sowing of crops, high cost of seeds for crops, high transportation costs, and high cost of fuel. The farming households also reported problems in selling their crop produce due to COVID-19 related measures such as constrained access to market due to movement restrictions, demand for crop production, like that. I mean, please, if I'm not overshooting my time, let me run through the slides. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows that Sindh Drought Needs Assessment. It was designed and implemented by the Natural Disaster Consortium, NDC, in 8 drought-affected districts: Tharparkar, Umarkot, Sangar, Jamshoro, Badin, Thatta, Dadu, and Kambarshadatkot in 2019. The 3 major problems faced by farming households as they reported are lack of water for crop cultivation, lack of access to high-yielding variety seeds, and lack of access to fertilizer. They indicated the need for irrigation water, quality seeds, fertilizer, new irrigation system, agricultural services, and tools and credit to enhance the crop production. Major proportion of their income has been on food purchases, thereby compromising on the other basic needs. For example, healthcare, education, others. 18% of households have acceptable food consumption, while 41% have poor consumption, and another 41% have borderline. About 45% of the surveyed households travel within 10 kilometers to buy food and non-food items from the nearest markets. 24% travel between 10 to 20 kilometers, while 31% travel more than 20 kilometers. Next slide, please. Now, why gender is an important consideration for security. Statistics show that 500 children died in 2018 for reasons such as low birth weight, neonatal sepsis, and birth asphyxia. Issues closely related to maternal health and food and water security. Under and malnutrition is also associated premature births on low birth weight amongst newborns and have also been attributed to crop failure in Tharparkar in Sindh, resulting from climate change and the subsequent drop in food security in the desert district. Agricultural gender inequalities remain strong. Women farmers are particularly at risk of hunger, especially when crisis strikes. Patriarchal norms create disadvantages for women farmers, especially in land rights, small plots, difficulties attaining ownership, discriminatory inheritance rights, productive resources, no access to credit, extension services or inputs, unpaid work, insecure employment, and exclusion from decision-making and political representation within the household. Because of weaker bargaining position, they frequently eat less, probably least, last and least well. Women farmers who control resources generally have better quality diets. Increasing summer heat is also adding to women's physical exertion as well as impacting crop yield. Next slide, please. Now, the government of Sindh has formulated its own climate change policy. This policy has been drafted, but it has not been tabled for approval as yet. So in its draft policy, which is in its final stages, the policy objectives of climate change policy have been listed here: to enhance the interdepartmental coordination and cooperation for effective climate action, ensure water, food, and energy security for Sindh province in the face of a changing climate, and ensure interests of vulnerable groups and other gender aspects are adequately addressed in climate development strategies and planning. Next slide, please. Salient features of the proposed measures of Sindh climate change policy, the draft policy. It is to promote use of climate resilient organic fertilizer and pesticides and high yielding inputs and practices. Commission relevant institutions and departments to undertake scientific studies on plant pathogen relationship and patterns of pest and disease spread specific to sin and specific to projected changes in temperature, and to develop appropriate digital simulation models for assessment of climate change impacts on physical, chemical, biological, and financial aspects of agricultural production system in various agroecological zones. And to improve demand forecast, access to farm produce, market structure and supply chains, ensure value addition of produce, establish climate change units or centers at agricultural research organizations in the province to categorize areas according to the vulnerability to extreme climate change events, climate resilient crop varieties, modern farming techniques, promote water efficient farming techniques, especially in low rainfall areas such as drip irrigation, precision farming, laser leveling, and nutrient management, increase resilience, increase reliance on crops and agricultural inputs, and improve food security. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide. This shows the current initiatives with partners, examples of gender responsive collaboration between Sindh government and civil society groups. It includes mangroves rehabilitation in the coastal areas, actively involving women, forestry and wildlife departments in Sindh and Balochistan working together, transforming Indus Basin Sindh government targeting women especially in tree plantation drive in some areas. This is leading to mitigation and is also source of livelihood for community women via government buyback. Green buses are also being considered in Sindh. Landhi cattle colony, which has been dumping cattle bio-waste into the river, and fish have been dying in the river as a result of bio-waste and flood, etc., being addressed. They are being addressed properly. These buses will use biofuel from the colony, and the slurry is expected to be used in Malay farming areas as fertilizer. Nuriabad project seeking converting waste energy into electricity. A public-private partnership set up as Sindh Transmission and Dispatch Company. Now government is considering how STDC can help improve energy distribution system and tap into the electricity being produced via solar energy and wind energy. CSR companies being pursued to develop wind farm areas. They are federally regulated, but the Environment Department has engaged these companies separately to play a role in corporate social responsibility in terms of health units, schools, dispensaries, etc., and to consider the environment and forestation in all their work. The department does not have easy access to funds and is reliant on external donor-funded projects, private funding by conscientious individuals, political figures, or international financial institutions. Many small startups and tech-based low-cost solutions also remain underfunded across the province, which could significantly improve women and girls' adaptation and resilience to climate change. This department looks to support organizations in their endeavors that align with the Sindh climate change policy. The initiative proposed by Pathfinder International therefore align with the Sindh climate change policy, the draft policy, working to ensure gendered integration into climate change programming, while also developing evidence on the nexus and praxis of health, climate change policy, and gender. The organization's work in third will prove to be invaluable in its lesson for the department, as well as build evidence that supports the Sindh government vision on integrated approach to climate change, gender, and health.
Thank you
Next slide,
so
please. Very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed Assam Gauri. Is that great questions? I'm going to move us along so we can stay on time. I've seen some questions in the chat and made note of them. And what we're going to do is save the questions for the panel discussion after our three panelists here. Thank you so much for providing a very clear picture on the challenges in terms of the vulnerability and of Pakistan under climate change, and also then really presenting your approach to solutions from within the government of Pakistan. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our next speaker, Pamela. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Pamela Hondusso is the Advocacy Manager for East and Southern Africa. And she is going to be speaking to us about, the title is Building Women's Climate Resilience and Food Security in Tuungane Project, Western Tanzania. So please, Pamela, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thank you. We'll begin with a documentary on Pathfinder International's field experience in building women's leadership in food security, economic empowerment, and climate change in Tuungane Project in Western Tanzania.
Welcome to special program of Tuungane Project, which is being implemented in Katavi and Kigoma regions, especially in Mahale mountain ranges and the coast of Lake Tanganyika. Some of people on those areas are living in substandard housing as their lives are insecure. But it has become common for some rural residents to fail to eat at least 2 meals a day, although technically at least 3 meals a day are needed. But also saving is a major problem for rural people who do not have access to financial institutions, including banks, whereby they end up spending randomly. As a result of Tuungane project, which has been implemented in several villages in Uvinza districts at Kigoma region and Tanganyika at Katavi region, some of women households have sent an example of modern house because of what they have gained from group saving.
Kwa jina naitwa Nusura Sadiki, mkaaji wa Konkwa.
I'm called Nusura Sadiq, a resident of Mkokwa Buhingwat, Uvinza district. Previously, before the introduction of Tuungane, I used to participate in chipua farming. I used to cultivate 2 acres and harvested only 8 bags of maize. Life was difficult. After that, we got this project of Tuungane. Tuungane educated us, opened our eyes, and helped to change our way of living. We used to practice mixed cropping and harvested very little. After getting training from Tuungane this year, I have harvested almost 52 bags of maize. I have sold part of the harvest and kept 19 bags, which I believe are enough and will take my family to the next season. I am sure the stock I have kept is enough for feeding my family.
Kwa jina naitwa Shabani Idi Kajugagula, mkazi wa kijiji cha Nkonkwa.
My name is Shabani Kajugagula, resident at Nkokwa village, Buhingwadi at Uvinza district. I'm the husband of Nusura Sadiq, who is member of the Tuungane group. My wife got training from Tuungane, and in fact, she came and encouraged to change our old way of farming to modern farming. I am happy to say that the knowledge has helped us to change our way of living. Our life is quite different from life we experienced several years back. Now our family is able to send our children to school. This modern farming has taken our family from poor life to better life. My family can now get meal, lunch at 12 noon, and dinner in the evening. I get breakfast in morning. Food is available at home all the time. I highly appreciate the effort done and the knowledge this Tungane group has brought to our people. I wish the Tungane could allow me also to join them and be part of the organization. I would like also to urge my fellow men to allow their wives to join the Tungane group. Their decision will bring about development and achievement in their lives.
In implementing the Tungane project, which is being fulfilled in Katavi and Kigoma regions, the project have reached the people along the coast of Lake Tanganyika in the village of Isengule in Tanganyika district, and recently we are witnessing major changes.
My name is Nuru Ramadan, a teacher of Kokoba at Isengulu Ward. Beginning from the year 2018 to 2021, our corporation have managed to raise 16 million Tanzanian shillings. This amount has enabled us to purchase 3 motorcycles, a project that helps us to raise more funds for the group. Members of the group, they benefit through borrowing, the amount from which they invest by lending to other traders and get profit. And at the end, an individual return the moral one. And at the end, an individual return the money one has borrowed to the group. Most members have managed to build their own houses simply by saving the money they get after the small traders return. I am called Agnes. I can say that I have benefited a lot from this Tungane group. When I have financial problems, I borrow money to solve those problems. Sometimes I borrow money and use it to generate more income, and at the end, I return the loan and keep the profit for my own use. The money I have helps me send my children to school, and I've used some to build a permanent toilet.
Women in the family are said to be main foundation of household, and they have a tradition of forming groups. Those groups have distinguished them in saving compared to others. One of the group is BMU Karema Group with 30 women members. Here they are explaining the importance of group saving.
The facilitators came and then trained us. They told us to form an organization that is Kokoba today. We took the advice. The group helps us manage to send our children to school. That's the greatest achievement. We started by contributing money, and then later, each person was allowed to go and borrow some amount. I managed to get a farm out of my loan. Later, I managed to build a house. I first bought a plot and later built a house. I have managed to repay back the loan. I now have a very good house. I have bought mattress for my children. Before that, my children had no mattresses. I had only one mattress before joining the group. After joining the Tungane BMU, I took a loan of 100,000, and which is now doing well. I started slowly with 10 bags of rice, and later my business grew, and now I can buy 30 bags of rice.
These are just a few of many achievements made through a Tungane project, aimed to eradicate poverty in Isengule and Karema villages in Tanganyika district at Katavi region and Konkwa village in Buhingu ward, Uvinza district at Kigoma region.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now proceed to a discussion about the project. The Tungane project serves a remote rural communities along the shores of Lake Tanganyika, as you have seen in the video, in the greater Mahale ecosystem. The next slide depicts the Tungane project's key issues faced by communities that were identified during project consultative processes. And you can see they highlight natural resource degradation, food insecurity, population pressure, climate change, and unmet family health needs, as well as limited economic opportunities and limited participation of women and youth in civic engagement. It also points to the strategies and interventions that were developed. All the project challenges were interlinked, and no one entity or approach could address them alone. The integrated population health and environment, or women-led climate resilience approach, was identified as a potential solution to these interconnected problems. Next slide. Community challenges, as you can see, and needs are interconnected, and they require cross-sectoral relationships and partnerships to address the population health and environment, food security, and livelihood needs. The project is implemented by Pathfinder in partnership with local government authorities, communities, and the Nature Conservancy. The project has 3 interventions: terrestrial, health, and freshwater. But for purposes of today, we will be looking at how the terrestrial ecosystem and its effects of climate change and how these impact on women's lives. Next. This slide shows how Pathfinder works with women to address food security in the population health and environment, or women-led climate resilience program. As you heard and saw from the women in the field documentary, the Tungane project engages women to address food security and climate challenges in 2 key ways. The first is directly through climate smart agriculture support, as described on the slide. And the second is indirectly through access to local finances and entrepreneurship training, leading to diversification in the sources of income and increased ability to meet food needs. The next slide. We now begin to look at some of the outcomes, and the first is the increased food security. Increases in maize yields, a food staple, has improved food security in Tungane project sites and increased farmers' incomes through sales of surplus. This income generated from sale of agricultural crops has been used for development purposes. That is, paying school fees, medical services, and construction of better housing for community members. Apart from the farmers earning income through sale of crops, farmers' daily consumption and nutrition has improved in Tungane program areas. Because farmers are getting more crop yields per unit area than previously, they have left some of their fields fallow for 2 to 4 years. And this practice has allowed the fallowed farmland to undergo natural regeneration, which reverses climate change by rebuilding organic soil matter and restoring degraded soil biodiversity. Some fallowed fields, which had become barren land due to continuous farming, have regenerated naturally into forests. Let's look at the second outcome, environmental conservation, on the next slide. Before Tungane started conducting training on climate smart agriculture, farmers weren't using ridges, causing soil erosion, which carried sediments into Lake Tanganyika and other water bodies. However, the number of farmers following training, farming close to Lake Tanganyika and rivers has decreased by 40%, reducing the amount of sediment directly entering water bodies. The reduced sedimentation has increased fish catch, a major challenge before the project began. This provides a guarantee on availability of fish, which is the main source of protein in Tungane communities. The next slide. The third key outcome, access to local finances through community conservation microfinance groups, such as you saw and heard on the video, has reduced the high dependency of women, who comprise 67% of the membership, and youth, on natural resources for survival. These businesses have boosted household income and helped them become more resilient to shocks related to climate or other causes. The extra financial resources allow households to meet basic needs, including food when crop yields are low. The community conservation microfinance groups have helped women and youth access loans with low interest rates and start environmentally friendly businesses. Indeed, some groups have set aside funds to purchase health insurance for family members, thereby ensuring that members are afforded financial protection against catastrophic health outcomes. The fourth key outcome was the increased knowledge and uptake of sexual and reproductive health information and services. And we are very pleased to also note that the project engaged more men in sexual and reproductive health. Women became part of natural resource management practices. There was increased knowledge and uptake of family planning while ensuring women and households are food secure and have access to income. In short, through our PHE women-led climate resilience approach, the project has been able to achieve many outcomes beyond health. With those few words, I'd like to say thank you, Asante Sana, and Dr. Joseph Komwihangiro, the country director for Pathfinder International in Tanzania, and his team are available for further information and clarification. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pamela, for sharing the story of this project and how successful your women-led climate resilience approach has worked. As a reminder to everyone, after the next presentation, we'll have a panel discussion, including questions from the audience. So if you have questions for Pamela, please type them in the Q&A box. With that, I'd like to move on to our final panelist for today's session, Toyosi. Toyosi is going to be speaking about youth engagement in food security and gender. She's the founder of Action GX. So I'd like to hand it over to you, Toyosi, please.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, it's been so informative listening to everyone speak. Please can I have the next slide, please? I'll just run through it so I don't take time. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So basically, I'm going to be talking about youth engagement in food security and gender. And if we think about it, youth engagement is the involvement of young people. So it's not only in taking the simple actions, it's also in taking the challenging actions in creating a positive and lasting social change. Next slide, please. So now we're going to take a look at the current situation. Now, it's very, very obvious that our role as young people is is crucial to creating a lasting social change, and because our numbers are ever rising. And I know that what we bring to the table as someone that runs a youth organization, or that is in charge of a youth-led organization, is that we bring a certain consciousness to global issues. So whether we're talking about social inclusion, or we're talking about climate change, or we're talking about gender inequality, I know that we just kind of like shine the light on the different. Can you hear me? Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better, Teriosi, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so I'm just going to go on. So in looking at the current situation of youth engagement, I know that the involvement of youth in agriculture, is very important, but we know that there's different obstacles that young people face in going into agriculture. One of it is, can you hear me now? Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my sound. I would have thought. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. So yeah, one of it is, thank you everyone. So one of it is the income generation, because we know that a lot of young people don't have access to income. Then we also know that there is the part of land availability and accessibility. Also, gender representation is a big obstacle in young people being involved in agriculture. Another one that I would like to put focus on is the lack of participation in policy making. We know that most times young people are not at the seat of table in which policies are being made. Okay, please, next slide. Now, the edge that youth have. Now, one of the things I know that I would say is that working with young people, I've realized that because we have an understanding of the emerging trends, like we are very instrumental in bringing the change that we need. And also, we also have that, single-mindedness of just trying different approaches. Now, because I'm young also, and I work with young people, I know that there are certain solutions that we bring to the table until we get that solution to solve a particular problem that we have. So our understanding of issues and our just doggedness to keep working our solutions until we get it, I would say that is very instrumental in bringing the change that we need. Next slide, please. Now, the ways in which we young people engage in food security and gender, and here I'm using the case study of my organization because we tend to, we've been working in food security and gender. Now, one of the things I know that we do is education. Now, we believe that education is one of the most important tools in which you can engage women in farming. And we understand that, when we teach people what to do, or maybe not teach them what to do, when we give them the knowledge that they need, it makes it easier for them to work on solutions themselves. So I would say that one of the ways in which we do this is through advocacy campaigns. And we provide the women with appropriate sustainable strategies. So we're not just providing them with strategies that are vague, we're providing them with just targeted sustainable strategies that can effectively achieve food security for their livelihood. Now, another way in which we do this is through investment. Now, before I say every other thing, one of the things that I would hammer on is the ways in which we do these 3 steps is through networking. So we network with other people, and we understand that the power of network, it makes the work done, or it gets the job done. Now, the next thing we do is investments, and this we do by developing a community income generating project. And now we work on, just providing the women with the opportunity so that in case rain falls, they are not relying on or waiting for the season when rain comes. They are farming all year round with the solutions that we provide. Now, the last one I would say is the introduction of technology. I'm sure we would all say that we understand the important role that technology plays in certain times that we are in. And so we work on incorporating appropriate technologies and informations tailored to meet agricultural demands and to also boost food security. Next slide, please. Now, the challenges are most times you're looking for funding to carry out a particular idea or to carry out a particular solution. And because we don't have it, I know that at one point you will get deterred, or you will get, what's the word I would say, disappointed. You probably will not be able to carry on with the work because you don't have enough funding to do it. I know that that's one major challenge. Now, another challenge I would say is language and literacy barriers when working with different host communities. Now, I'll give an example. I'm from Nigeria, and I know that in Nigeria, we have over 200 different languages. And the only languages I'll say I speak in Nigeria is Yoruba, and maybe our official language, which is English. Even my pidgin is a bit shaky. So I know that in some communities, I'm not able to effectively communicate with them. So one of the things that, well, I'll talk about the solutions later. So I know that literacy barriers is a major thing too. Now, another thing I would say that it's a challenge is human capacity. Now, if you work with young people, or if you work in different organizations or an NGO, you realize that we need manpower to be able to carry out certain things. Like, we just need people on ground. Whilst we know that we have people that will probably work behind the scenes, we also need what I'll call the foot soldiers, like the people that will go into the communities, that will work with different communities. And sometimes we do not have that number. Next slide, please. Now, the possible solutions. Now, one of the things that we're advocating is that in our curriculums, like at different levels, so whether you're starting at primary school or secondary school, or even up to the tertiary institutions, like we have it ingrained in our curriculums, where young people are, thought on the core issues like food security, taking climate action, just bridging the gap between men and women, because we realize that having the knowledge at an early age, it gives you that opportunity to just be, invested in different other programs. Because I realize that sometimes for people to get, because they're not, what's the word I would say, they're not engaged, or they don't know about certain issues, they're not motivated to contribute to the solution. So I would say that having that curriculum from the young age, where we have thought about the core issues that people face on a daily, on day to day, would also, interest people in getting engaged in these issues. Now, another thing I would say is building capacity through innovative learning via internships, volunteering, placements, and job opportunities. Now, when we have this platform, I feel like it provides young people an opportunity to know that, okay, I can do my part. So even whilst I'm going to uni, or whilst I'm in secondary school, I can volunteer for this particular program. And the beautiful thing that we'll say is that because of the capacity that people are building, so you're not just building it in one particular sector. So you're probably building it in the sense of, oh, you know how to write grants, or you're building it in how to communicate with different communities. So we'll say that this is a major way in which we can buy youth engagement. Now, the third one is leveraging on the power of indigenous languages to support diversity. Now, I believe that when we have different people, when we have different languages, involved, it is easier for young people to get involved in the work. So let's say the example I would say is that one of the things that we do is that the different communities that we work with people that understand maybe 2 or more languages. So probably they understand English, and they understand Pidgin, and they understand their native language. So it's easy for us to do the cross communication. Next slide, please. So what we advocate for, I think this is the last slide, is we're just advocating for more youth to be interested and just work in different issues ranging from food insecurity, climate change. So there's no end to the issues that young people can get involved in. And we understand that, with our rising number across the globe, we hope that, we are involved not just in doing the groundwork, but also being involved in policy making decisions and bringing change to different communities, one social change at a time. So thank you everyone for listening. I think that's my last slide. I was trying to rush through, so I speak within the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toyosi, for sharing that. And I am happy to move us into the next part of the session, which is question and answer with all the panelists. So Toyosi, Pamela, Mohammed, it would be great if you could turn your videos on. And I've seen some questions in the Q&A and the chat. And let's see, keep them coming. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them, but let's see. Mohammed, are you there? I see. We have a question for you, I know. If you could turn your video on, that would be great.
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Great. And Pamela, would you like to turn on your video as well? And then we'll have all the speakers as panelists at once. So I'll get started. Mohammed, since you were the first panelist, give you the first question as well. So you presented a picture of the challenges and vulnerability in food security, especially under climate change, and especially for women. And the question is, and you also presented some policy approaches coming from the government about how to address that and make sure to be inclusive of vulnerable groups. The question is, how were women involved in the process in defining the SIND climate change policy members? Or perhaps put another way, since the title of this, this webinar is about women leading the way, can you explain to us about how that worked in your case in Pakistan?
Okay, about the SIND climate change policy, I tell you that there has been a long, five-year long consultative process that has taken place before this draft has been prepared. And during this process, during this consultative process, we had interactions with almost all walks of life, people from all walks of life, and that also include women. And specifically, if I talk about the Pathfinder, they also taken on board, and they were also consulted. And like them, there are many other organizations which were taken on board, which were consulted. And this draft is actually a product of a mutual understanding of issues and inclusion through participative process. So this is actually this is not something that we have come up in a few weeks or months. As I told you, it's a 5-year long consultative process that has produced this draft policy.
Thank you for that. Maybe I'll use my position as moderator to ask a question to Pamela that's also maybe related to one for Toyosi, and Mohammed maybe also have a perspective too. But especially when I was watching your presentation, Pamela, I thought, wow, you know, you're really presenting a great best practice example. You have results to show, improvement to show. My question is, you know, it's always the case that solutions are context specific. You need to know the culture, that when you want to implement something on the ground, the local conditions and culture is very important. Nonetheless, is it possible for you to generalize, if you have 1, 2, or 3, you know, top pieces of advice, if we want to take the kind of work that you presented and scale it up, bring it to other communities, bring it to other continents, other cultures, what type of advice would you give? Can you summarize that in a few points, perhaps?
Absolutely. As Pathfinder International, one of the things we've learned through implementation of programs in the many countries that we've worked, 20 to 22 currently, is that it's important to engage both men and women at the community level. In other words, for gender synchronization, for increased impact when engaging in projects of this nature. The second thing is that it's important to start work at the level of the community. That's where behavior change begins. And particularly in rural communities where issues of power dynamics, because I saw a question there about how were we able to engage men meaningfully in an initiative that was actually targeting women, strengthened economic resilience of households, targeting girls and women through inclusive and diversified, environmentally friendly income generating activities. And that required us as an organization at the community level to work with the government, because the government will always be there. Projects come and go, but for sustainability, the government will remain. So we worked very closely with the government through the district community development officers to conduct supportive supervision for community conservation microfinance groups and other environmental friendly livelihood and income generating activities. And through these community conservation microfinance groups, which comprise of a group of people, in this case women, who save together through the accumulation of weekly shares and taking small loans from the savings accumulated, we were able to use this as a tool for women's empowerment so that they could be empowered economically. And the main difference for those of you who are listening and wondering, what's the difference between this structure, community conservation microfinance tool, and traditional voluntary savings and loans that we're all familiar with, is that the community conservation microfinance group is a community group that has to abide to health and conservation practices. So if a group member takes a loan from this group, they have to fill a form that identifies harmful environmental activities such as charcoal burning, but they must invest in economic activities that do not harm the environment. So it was a way of sort of changing the paradigm and changing the way people think at the level of community, but empowering the community economically and increasing women's agency. So if I had to give a few points, start at the community, work with the government, because that will remain long after you leave as an NGO, and also work very closely with women and young people.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And this engagement with communities is really a theme that's coming across both in the case of Pakistan and the Chugani project. Toyosi, maybe to you, as a youth advocacy organization, what do you wish from your governments when they engage or maybe do not engage enough with the youth? Do you have particular asks for governments which maybe are not yet populated with youth in positions of power?
I think what I would probably say is to probably just get us more involved in what is happening, because basically most times I feel like we do most of the groundwork, because most of the organizations that I know are youth-led, and because we've gone to different communities, we've done needs assessments, we probably know what is happening. So we're not going to every community saying, oh, this is what we want. No, we're just we go asking or just communicating with them on the issues that they have. So I probably prefer that, the government probably will work more hand in hand with us, because sometimes you want to work with the government, you're going to their offices over and over and over and over again, and you probably won't have like a concrete answer as to, oh, we will do this and do that. Not to get me wrong, there are a lot of government organizations that actually show up and network with us when we need them. But I'll just say that for more of them just need to get involved in what young people are doing and just look for active partnership in the work that we're doing.
Thank you. I'm looking in the chat for additional questions. I see one for you, Toyosi, that's quite specific. I don't know whether you have an answer for that, but I'll read it out loud here. There's a general thinking that both commercial and substance agriculture is for people who are older in age. Have you been able to attract the youth in this sector? And if so, how? Is that something you can speak to and maybe give a little explanation? I have to admit that I'm not sure what the difference between or what commercial and substance agriculture refers to specifically. Toyosi, I think you're on mute if you're speaking.
Oh, sorry. So I think I would answer the question of how we've been able to attract young people into farming. Now, I would say I would agree with that, because I mean, farming isn't something that is very attractive to young people, and to be honest, it's labor intensive when we think about it. But one of the ways in which we're seeking to attract youth is the use of technology. I mean, I feel like 50%, I'm not going to be ambitious and say 80, but let's say 50% of young people are in tune with technology, they use technology. And I feel like that's a major way in which we can attract them into farming. And thankfully, there are lots of young people, at least if I don't know about every other African country, I can talk about Nigeria in the sense that I know about 10 young farmers that are doing good and they're doing well. So those will be the kind of people that we would employ, or not employ, but just talk to, network with, to have a talk with young people to get into farming, because they make farming look very, very lovely. So, I mean, it would be nice to just have them on board to talk to other young people about getting into farming. I don't know if I've answered that person's question.
Thank you. We also have a specific question from Mohammed. How is the government of Pakistan addressing issues of violence against women, especially when they are searching for water or better farming land? Is that one that you're able to respond to?
Okay, could you repeat, please? What's the question?
The question was regarding violence against women, especially when they are searching for water or better farming land. That this is an issue. Is the government of Pakistan addressing this or attempting to address this?
Well, there certainly are problems, and we know that these things happen. And the government of Pakistan and the provincial government of Sindh and other provincial governments, they are all, I mean, doing their bit to control this violence against women. And we have also enacted several laws, and we are also doing a lot to implement those laws, which actually, whenever there is violence against women, and especially in the rural areas, sometimes these are highlighted out of proportion. Sometimes I would not belittle that this is something. It doesn't happen. It does happen, but sometimes they are blown out of proportion. Yes, we are. The government is cognizant of this problem, and they are taking appropriate steps. They are taking suitable steps there to control this. And the law and order situation, and especially in rural areas, it is. I mean, they are taking care of it. And if you see the data for the last few years, you will see that such kind of incidents, they are not, they are somewhat declining, not increasing, or if they are stable, then I would say that this is a success of the government, that such kind of acts, such kind of incidents are declining. That's it.
Thank you. I have one more question that I've seen in the chat. And then after about feminist perspectives, but I'll just queue up, we're gonna wrap up this Q&A and also have closing remarks from Lisa Hilmi, but if anybody else has questions they wanna put in the chat, or if any other of the organizers have questions that they saw in the chat that I missed, or questions that are really on their minds, I would invite them soon to raise them. But the question from the chat is, have any of the projects included feminist perspectives beyond gender analysis? And if so, could you please elaborate on this? So I guess, are there any panelists who can say that the answer is yes, and then elaborate on this? Okay, I'm guessing the answer might be no or not explicitly. So in case anybody wants to jump in and correct me, please do that. And before I hand over to Lisa Hilmi, is there anyone else from the hosting team that wants to raise a question that I missed? I'll look for any videos coming on or hands raised. Okay, thank you so much for this very productive and interesting discussion and for sharing your insights. And I would like to invite Lisa Hilmi, who is from the CORE Group, to provide her closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. It's been a really rich discussion. Some of these keywords we've heard, the edge of youth, I really found that powerful. Empowerment, consultation, community, very important words. We know the response to the climate crisis vis-a-vis the agriculture sector, it needs to take in those gender dynamics into account and be gender transformative. The agricultural sector is predicted to come under so many stress factors due to climate change, including temperature, variability in rainfall. We have weather events that will trigger crop failure, water issues. It's going to be profound. We know that women are responsible for half of the world's food production. And in most low and middle income countries, they produce between 60 and 80% of the food. And yet women only receive a small fraction of assistance for agricultural investment. Women in Africa receive less than 10% of small farm credit and a mere 1% of total credit for the agricultural sector. In addition, we know that women are responsible for nutrition in most homes and therefore the health of the children and the family. They're responsible for the purchase and preparation of food, but due to traditional gender norms, they may have limited access to education and control over the resources. Today, we heard of some very, very important projects that are making changes. And at CORE Group, we have our Health and Climate Change Initiative that will consider climate as a cross-cutting issue to address food security and overall health. Through food, livelihood, and nutrition security, we know these are critical issues that CORE Group will address through a multi-sectoral approach that integrates technical solutions to impact climate change on agriculture with nutrition science and community engagement. We'll do this through analysis, advocacy, and action. We know this must be addressed through these gender transformative approaches as well as youth engagement. Look for more and get on our listservs at coregroup.org. And lastly, we know that the role of women as producers and providers of food should be respected, uplifted, and that the importance of gender to household food security must be emphasized. This includes men in the discussion and raising the importance. Giving up power should be considered as important as for gender equality. We do this through policy and programs. We heard about the success of the SIN climate change policy and how they integrated that gender into their policy and their programs. The youth engagement piece through education, investment, and technology is key. And then the Tungani project. And Tungani, as you may have heard, is the Swahili word for let us unite. So I urge all of us right now to unite, Tungani, for climate action, gender, food security, and health. Thank you so much to our speakers from the government of Pakistan, Pathfinder Action, GX, and Dr. Mar from Women's Leaders for Planetary Health. And of course, our CORE Group team, David and Eli. Thank you to our translators as well. Dr. Mar, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for those closing and inspiring words about uniting. I think this webinar was a chance for us to make new connections, and I hope that we can all strengthen these going forward. For the final closing, I will hand it over to Ruth, I believe, who will close the session.
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking Madam Lisa, the Executive Director for CORE Group, for the great remarks. Our moderator, Dr. Kathleen, for the awesome moderation. A big thank you to all our panelists for the great insights. The organizers of this webinar, CORE Group and Pathfinder, wish to thank all the attendees. I want to remind all of us that we'll be receiving the materials for this webinar in the emails that we used to register in the next few days. I want to thank all of us and wish all of us a good morning, afternoon, and a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.